Hello, I'm Steph from Blues Point. Today we are going to have a chat about job hopping. Last week in my video I talked about job hopping from the client's point of view, and today I'm going to look at it from the candidate's point of view. So many of us, including myself, might have been in the position where we've changed jobs more quickly than intended, maybe even more than once. And it can leave us vulnerable to being overlooked and sort of dismissed as looking like a bit of a job hopper. Perhaps that's obviously not what recruiters want to see. It's not what clients want to see. But it happens for reasons out of our control sometimes. It would make hiring managers very wary of hiring us if it doesn't look like we are able to stick with the job for a very long time. So what I want to talk about today is if you are in this position and you perhaps move from job to job, how to present your experience in a positive way, and how to handle questions about a CV that appears to be less than perfect, if that makes sense. So the first point I would make is to be truthful in your CV. Don't try to cover it up if you've got a bit of a period when you've jumped from job to job, because all the client or the recruiter will need to do to establish that you're being untruthful is to take up a reference for you, or perhaps to cross-reference with your LinkedIn profile. So just be honest is the first tip I would give you. The second tip is to explain any short-term roles on your CV in as positive a way as you can. So imagine you've been in a role for perhaps 6 months, it wasn't a good fit, you moved on quite quickly, and think about what you learned from that experience. I improved my skills in such and such technology, I gained client-facing experience. All of these are positive things that you could say about it. It's also fine to acknowledge that you moved on because the role wasn't right for you. It demonstrates self-awareness, and it also shows on your CV that you're motivated to find the right job, not just any job, because you've learned from the experience. The third point I would like to make is to suggest that you write an application letter to accompany any job applications that you do. Just bear in mind, obviously, if your CV is perhaps not the strongest CV that the recruiter's going to have in front of them, all the other applicants probably won't bother writing an application letter. It's a really good thing to do. It gives you the chance just to introduce yourself, to demonstrate that you've got the skills they're looking for, and it just makes your application stand out from the crowd. So that's a really good tip. The next couple of tips are about how to handle interviews, because you are going to be under scrutiny. Recruiters and hiring managers are going to want to know why you've jumped from job to job. The first point about that is to not be defensive. That's really important, because if you are quite defensive, if you sort of respond to scrutiny by sort of saying, well, why do you want to know that? It does come across that you've got something to hide, and they will grill you on it. So you need to be prepared for that. Just think about it before the interview. Be as honest as you can. It's absolutely fine to say, do you know what, I made a mistake. It wasn't the right role for me, and here's what I've learned from it. If you feel that a role was missold to you, which can happen a lot, again, that's something you can put quite a positive spin on. Think about what you've learned from it. The role wasn't what I expected, but I've picked up some great skills, tried something different, and perhaps you've also learned that you need to ask more questions at interview to make sure that your next role is the right fit, so you won't be taken by surprise again. And that leads me very nicely into the second point I want to make about interviews, which is to make sure that you ask a lot of questions at the interview. It's a two-way process. Use the interview to make sure that the role is absolutely right for you, so you don't jump out of the frying pan and into the fire. Don't make the same mistake as the last time. If your last role wasn't a good fit, use the interview to make sure this one will be, and if it isn't, then hold fire. Don't jump ship just yet. So these final two tips are along the same lines, but these are for those people who are worried that their CV is if they're sort of moving into job hopper territory and don't want to be dismissed on that basis. This one's really important. If you're sort of okay in your role, i.e. things could be better, but you're okay for now, then sit tight. Don't jump ship immediately. Don't panic and rush into another role that's not going to be right for you and continue the job hopping cycle. If you're okay, sit tight and wait for the right opportunity. Follow the other tips that I've already mentioned, like writing quality applications, and just sit tight until the right role comes along. That's much better than making another hasty decision. And finally, another good tip is to be prepared to take a sideways step. So, better progression might come from a role that is at the same level, but perhaps offering a better career path for the long term. So, it might mean that you move for the same salary as you're on, or even a little bit less. But ultimately, you'll be in a better position in the longer term. That's worth bearing in mind when you're applying for jobs. So in conclusion, if you've got a sort of recent history of doing a bit of job hopping, or perhaps your CV isn't working for you, and you think this might be why, don't despair. You might have to change things up slightly, but these tips really do work. For a summary of these tips, you can follow the link in the comments to my blog, which is about the same topic as this. And many thanks for watching. Thank you. Bye.